Hello, beloved. It's me, James, and it's that time of week when we do Lectio Divina, sacred reading together. Sacred reading, Lectio Divina, whichever you choose to call it, one's English, one's Latin, is the opportunity for us to read a sacred text with the anticipation and expectation that the very words themselves might convey to us by the power of Spirit, something we need to hear, something we need to know. It is predicated on the belief that the text is not dead, that the sacred text can still speak a truth to us right now that rings true deep inside, and that Spirit is the mover behind that we are listening for a word of encouragement, a challenge, calling us out, perhaps inspiration to go in a different direction than we imagined we would. Whatever it is, it's an invitation to take seriously Spirit's work in our lives and in the world around us. Now, if you've been following along with us, some of what I'm going to say is repetitive, but it's good to know that if you pop in for the first time, you can kind of catch up a little bit about where we are. We are currently reading the book of Ruth. It's a book from the Hebrew Bible, and it's the story of, as you can imagine, it's about Ruth, but we begin the story with Naomi, her husband Elimelech, and her two sons. There is a famine in Israel. They go off to Moab so they can eat out of necessity. While they're there, the two sons marry two Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. And then Naomi's husband dies and her two sons die, the husbands of Orpah and Ruth. And so needing to have an access to means of life, because in the time of the writing, women couldn't do their own work, weren't allowed to. They relied on the goodwill of a male, and so Naomi sent her two daughters-in-law to go back to Moab, to their people, perhaps to find a brother, a father, a cousin, an uncle, someone who will take them in and make sure that they're cared for. Orpah follows that. Ruth says she's not leaving Naomi, and she's going back with her to the land of her ancestors, back to Bethlehem. And so Naomi and Ruth set out. And that's where we left them off last week. And we're going to listen now to the verses 19 through 22, which ends the first chapter. And we're going to see if it can't speak something into our lives. If you do sacred reading on your own, I encourage you to read the text out loud. When I do it on my own, I read it out loud, and I read it 3 times out loud. And listen for the repeated echoes of something that may be true. Sometimes the first time through, I don't hear something, or I hear vaguely something, and by the time I've read it 3 times, it's either reinforced or I've gone in a new direction, new image, new phrase, new word. So that's what we're going to, when I do this though, in person, online like this, I only read it through once. As soon as I finish reading it, you can stop the video and you can go and read it for yourself aloud and figure out what it might mean for you. But if you want to hang around after that first reading, I will reflect on what stood out for me, what rose for me in this particular reading, in this particular moment in time when I read it. Because sometimes you could read the same text a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, hear something completely different, because Spirit may need to tell you something different. So catch your breath and let's read together from the book of Ruth. And together, Naomi and Ruth walked until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived, the town was abuzz with gossip because of them. The townspeople said to each other, "Could this sad person be Naomi, our joy?" But she said to them, "Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, bitterness. For Adonai has afflicted me, and Shaddai has brought bitter destruction on me. I was filled to the brim when I departed, but Adonai has brought me back empty. Why insist on calling me Naomi, since Adonai has passed sentence upon me and Shaddai has brought me to ruin?" And that is how Naomi left the land of Moab with Ruth the Moabite and returned to Bethlehem, arriving just as the barley harvest was beginning. I don't know about you, but for me, what struck me in this text was the power of a name, of a word. We don't tend to think of names quite as strongly as our ancestors in the faith, the Hebrew people, the Israelites, even the early followers of Jesus would have thought of a name as very important, vital. Its vibration, in fact, the root word in Hebrew and in Aramaic, Jesus' language, would have been such, it's a word that can be translated as light, name, vibration, atmosphere, etc. Those, the root of the word can be all of those things. You don't have to know all these things, by the way, to do sacred reading. It just happens I've recently read those things, and so I know how important names are. And names were chosen very carefully because they gave a sense of who the person was. Because the vibrational energy that person put out, the identity of that person was tied up in their name. Their name kind of said something about them. And the word, the name, Naomi, means joy. But when she left the land of Israel the first time to go to Moab and find her way, she was filled to the brim, she tells us. And when she returned, she's empty. And instead of calling her Naomi, she says to others, "You should call me Mara, bitterness, for I am empty." You know, I can identify with that feeling. I hear in that the echo of the fact that my feelings of emptiness at times, my feelings that I've poured myself out and now there's nothing left, has apparently, it's not a new feeling in the universe. It goes, we hear it in the echoes of this story. And Naomi experiences this as the loss of her joy and as God's choice in her life, God's way of seeing herself, God's way of re-identifying her. Because while there is no loud voice from on high that says, "Change your name," while there's no echo of that from on high, there is the sense of bitterness in her life. And passively, she feels as though her destiny has changed. The vibration of her life has changed from joy to bitterness. Have you ever felt like in your own life that your joy has turned to bitterness, that things have turned against you? And perhaps, as Naomi did, you see that as a statement of God on you, on your life. I certainly have felt that kind of feeling of being bereft in my own life, in my own struggles. These days, that old wonderful song, "Running on Empty," is something that touches me periodically. Trying to speak hope and encouragement and practice and grounding in a world filled with chaos and anger is very hard. It's very hard. And I feel the anger rise in me when I see people's lives upended for no apparent reason whatsoever. And when I see that happen, it causes me frustration and struggle. So I identify with and hear a word not only of encouragement, because it's not really an encouragement, except in the fact that I know I'm not alone. Naomi is not alone. Ruth has come with her. And as alone as she may feel in that moment, and as bitter as she may feel, having been emptied of what she thought was important, she has returned home. She has returned, and perhaps there is still something. But she's not going to leave the place that she finds herself unnamed. She's naming it. I'm not joyful anymore. I'm bitter. And perhaps this is a statement about who I am, a change in identity. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, bitter, struggling in the midst of all the things that might be happening in the world, I commend to you the story of Naomi and Ruth. By the end of the first chapter, Naomi is in desperate straits and feeling very bitter. And we can only hope that's not the end of the book. It isn't. And perhaps there is something ahead. But for now, naming where you are is okay. If you're feeling bitter, if you're feeling angry, if you're struggling, and if I'm those things, naming those things is appropriate. It's important. It may even feel like God is involved in some way. And God is big enough to hear whatever you need to say out loud about your own struggles, your own anger, your own bitterness. And Naomi says it out loud. I ought to be called something other than joy. Perhaps instead bitterness. I don't know if that helps you at all. That's what I heard today. And I encourage you to read the text on your own. If you want to catch up, you can watch the previous videos, or you certainly can go. You can certainly go pull out your own Bible if you want and read in small snippets that first chapter of Ruth. As always, welcome your responses, any thoughts you have, any way you hear the text and what it says to you. I'm always welcoming that kind of conversation and invitation. So until the next time, when we share sacred reading together again, I wish you all the best and remind you that you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. Wherever you find yourself, feel free to name it, cry out in the midst of it. And perhaps it may not change a thing, but it may help you to at least claim where you